I was accused of something I did not do. So instead of proving I was innocent, they were trying to put me in jail for the rest of my life. Then I figured out a secret. It was my colleague who set me up.
I'm 39 and male. I've worked at my job for 20 years and I love every moment that I'm here. It was a career that I thought I would have until I retired. And I had a secret hope that then the owner, Walt, 63, retired and he may allow me to take over the business. After all, he's trained me to know everything there is about the business. Unfortunately, that dream died a few days ago, and I'm still trying to work out what the heck happened. It was like one day everything was normal, and then the next it was like living in a nightmare that I could not wake up from. I'm still in shock about how things have gone, and no idea how I've got myself into this crappy situation. I have some theories, but they might just be me grasping at straws to try to find a rational explanation for an irrational situation. I need to try and make sense of the thoughts that are whirling around in my head though. And what better way than to write an anonymous post for people I don't even know and will never meet to read. And the internet is known for gloating at the misfortune of someone who's not them. It's a fantastic side effect of the internet that people are willing to share the worst parts of their entire life and characters while others feel smug about their lives and saying they're not so bad. As you can see, I'm currently feeling very sorry for myself. So, where to start? I guess I'll tell you my current situation and my plans to put my theories into words and see if they can make any sense at all, or if they look like ramblings of a man who's lost his mind. If any of you strangers reading this can see something that I've missed, think I'm on the right track, or think that I'm making mountains out of molehills, please comment right now. I need all the help I can get. As I said, I love my job, but I should really change that to I loved my job, as I'm no longer employed by my boss, and if things do not work out, I may never able to get a decent job ever again. You see, I work for a high-end jewelry store, owned by a grizzled, grumpy old man called Walt, who knows everything you could possibly want to know about gems and making beautiful jewelry. He's a walking encyclopedia of precious stones and how to set them in gold, silver, and platinum. When I was a teenager, I was a bit of a lost cause. I hated school and did not see the point of it. I hung out on the streets with the wrong type of people and was genuinely a bit of a thug. My mom, who worked her butt off, tried to provide a good life for me, was at her wit's end, and was convinced that her only son would end up spending his life in prison. That was until I met Walt. I think she was right. That was definitely the path I was on. Meeting Walt changed my life in every way. One evening, I was hanging around outside his shop, and my friends were giving him a hard time. He must have only been in his 40s then, but he had already perfected the grizzled old man look. The confrontation ended up with the store window being broke and the police being phoned. I was the only one who did not run, so I was the one who had to face the cops. They asked Walt if he wanted to press charges, and I still don't understand what his thinking was when he said no. Instead, he frog-marched me home to face my disappointed mother and gave me the chance that no one else had ever given me. He offered me an apprenticeship with him and a job if I changed my ways. I thought he was an idiot, but I took it to make my mom happy, and from the first moment I watched him setting a diamond ring, I was hooked. Walt took a huge chance that I would not rob him blind, and I have to admit my friends tried to force me to pocket some jewelry. But I'd suddenly found something I could not just pass up. I was passionate about it. My life changed, and in that 20 years I've worked there, I've qualified as a master jeweler. I'll never match Walt's skills, but I'm good at what I do. That brings us to the present and the situation I'm trying to work out, how the heck it all went down. Yesterday I was fired and arrested for stealing a number of uncut jewels, custom-made jewelry and money from the safe. I spent a miserable night at a police cell, and the look of disappointment on Walt's face will haunt me to my dying deathbed. To clear up any doubt, I didn't steal anything. I know every guilty person says that, but I genuinely did not steal the things I'm accused of. And this is where the theories come in, and I'm 100% sure that I don't know who did this and why. The problem is that all I have are theories and suspicion based on past events. I have no way to prove it, and this is why my head's going around and around in circles. as unless I can prove that I'm innocent, my mom's prediction for my future may come true, and I may end up spending the rest of my life in a prison cell. So the question I'm asking myself, and well, you good strangers of the interwebs, what the heck do I did to prove I did not do this and this slimy little jerk who hates me did? I almost 100% sure that the guy Walt took on to work in the main shop is the one who framed me. I can't prove it. His name's Richard, and I hate him with my entire being. I guess that catches us up to where I am currently. I got home from the police station an hour ago, and I need to shower up and sleep. Then I'll write out my suspicions, and you can see for yourself why I'm so sure that Richard is that little rat who's trying to destroy me. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is a very interesting one. I have 4 complete updates, all compiled from the original poster in chronological order. Guys, if you think that things have heated up so far, you've seen nothing yet. Just wait till you see who Richard, the little rat OP was talking about, really is. Alright guys, I hope you're having a great day. Here's update number 1. Alright, I feel better after having a shower and a bit of sleep. I was going to write some more last night, but I had a shower and something to eat and then just fell asleep on my face. I think all the stress must have exhausted me, and I slept solidly for over 12 hours. So, today I'm going to put all my circumstantial evidence into writing, and we can see if I'm the one right on track blaming the slimeball Richard. Richard started working with us around 18 months ago, straight from college. He has a degree in something to do with geology, and it turned into he wants to work with, to quote him, pretentious self, the stones of the earth. From the moment he started, I knew I was going to dislike him. He just screamed entitlement from every pore of his body, from his preppy little hairstyle to the toes of his handmade leather shoes. This boy was born into money, and it shows. His suits cost more than my entire wardrobe did. I realize that this makes me look like I'm jealous of Richard, right? Or hold it against him that I'm not as well off as him. But I assure you, that is not the case. There's something about him that makes me curl my lip in distaste. As my mom would say, all the money in the world can't make you a decent human being, eh? Walt asked me to show Richard the ropes, and I was happy to do so. Having someone who would work on the shop floor meant that I could stay in the back doing the things I loved best, fixing the designing jewelry. However, Richard seemed to think that he was being brought on to the manager, and within 2 weeks, he was throwing his weight around whenever Walt was not in the building. It started with small things, passive-aggressive comments about things being put away in order or not being packaged up to what he felt the shop standard should be. It was after I came out of the back to speak to a regular client that Richard went full-on jerk mode. The customer in question was an elderly lady, who we had made many pieces for over the years as gifts for her children and grandchildren. She was a lovely old girl. She asked for me by name, and when she arrived, it annoyed Richard. He came and got me, and I dealt with a request for a new order. She left happy, and I was about to go back into my room when Richard tutted and started muttering under his breath. So I looked over and asked if there was a problem, Richie. It turned out he had a huge problem with pretty much everything about me. He said I was too familiar with the customer because I called her by her first name. She had asked us to a long time ago, dude. I corrected the customer about her order, and I suggested a different type of setting as it would look neater, and his main issue was this. I look like a tramp, which would lower the tone of the business. I don't wear a suit for work and never will. Working in the back is a dusty job at times. We grind down gemstones, melt metals. I wear appropriate clothing for the job I do. Granted, by sweater, it does have holes in it from where the sparks and chemicals have burnt holes, and my hands are rough from the work that I do. But I would not say I look like a tramp. I look like a man who works for his hands for a living. I was shocked that Richard would say anything, and not wishing to have an issue with him, I just thanked him for his observations, and headed back to continue with work I was doing before the customer arrived. Once he had started, Richard managed to get the little digs in at me most days. To begin with, he was careful not to go far in front of Walt, and I couldn't understand why Richard had such an issue with me. It was a few weeks later when things started to get a bit weird around the shop. This is where I really think that I may be right about my suspicion of Richard. It began with a very small thing, and I've never been able to prove that there's something going on, and if the recent accusation of that theft had not occurred. I don't think I would have truly suspected Richard of being behind all the problems that started at work. It seemed like I just had a run of bad luck with some projects. It happens. But with hindsight, it happened a little too regularly for it to be a coincidence. Again, yeah, I might be overthinking. All this in a desperate attempt to find an answer to my problem. And that's what my lawyer seems to think's happening. I'm looking to blame someone else for my bad fortune. I'm not even sure that my own lawyer believes what I'm saying, and I don't take anything from Walt. While the situation sucks, one of the reasons I'm writing this is to put information together for my defense by writing down everything I can remember. I was surprised at the amount of comments I got from my original post, both positive and negative. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this update up. An answer to the most common question: no. I've not been stealing from my boss for 20 years, and I don't care what you think. It's possible for a bad person to change his life, whatever. It's too easy to convict someone on their past without giving them a chance to be a good person. For those of you who gave me the suggestions for my lawyer, thank you. I'm meeting him soon to run through the reasons why I suspect Richard, and I will update you when I get back from the rundown on things that happened prior to the theft. That makes me suspect that I'm not the one who's the criminal here. Update number 2. The meeting with my lawyer went well for the first time since this started. I think he actually can see that I may have a case. We sat down and wrote a timetable of the quote strange things that happened in the weeks up to the theft, and it really does look like a pattern. I thought with this update I would put those events down and see what everyone thinks. If anyone has any ideas on how to actually prove any of it, please let me know. I'll be very grateful. The first thing that happened was that small things in my workshop would go missing. Nothing important, but just things that made my life inconvenient. I couldn't find a particular tool that I needed for the day, or one of the machines would have a part missing or damaged. I barely even thought about it being sabotaged as it happens. The amount of tools I have misplaced over the years, but it began to happen every single day. I would replace a tool and within a few days it would be gone. I initially joked with Walt that I was getting old and forgetful, but it did not make sense when none of the missing tools ever turned up. Usually, I would misplace something, then a week later would find the bottom of my drawer, or next to the kettle in the kitchen. None of the missing stuff ever reappeared though. The tools we use are not cheap, and so I began to worry about how much it would cost to keep replacing them. Walt had not said anything, but I did see a frown when I said I needed to order a new set of pliers for the 3rd time in a month. He told me to be more careful, and well, that was that. The broken bits of machinery were more of an issue, as if we lost the ability to use one, it would put the orders back by days. Heck, even weeks. One day, after I've lost yet another chisel, I heard Richard say to Walt that maybe he should check my bag when I leave. He laughed at the end of the sentence, playing it off as a joke, but for a moment I saw a tiny bit of doubt in Walt's eyes. Then more serious things began to get lost. Walt's old-fashioned. We mainly rely on paper for recording orders, repairs, and even customer details. I always said we should come into the modern world and update to computer records, but Walt would say paper records have been good enough for the business since his grandfather opened it and were good enough for him. I always smiled and told myself I'll start a better way of keeping records for myself, but I never had time to do it. I wish I had, as it would have saved me from a lot of trouble. The first order to disappear was not a big one, and it was confident that I knew what the customer had ordered and was able to carry it out without anyone knowing it's gone. I may be projecting my hopes here, but looking back, I think Richard was surprised when that particular customer turned up, and I had the order done for them. The next one was more of a bigger issue. We had another regular client who, over the years, had spent an obscene amount of money with us. He had a lot of daughters, and we made all their wedding jewelry. He ordered beautiful gifts for his wife and mother, and he was a good customer. We took an order for jewels for his youngest daughter's wedding. It was a lavish affair, and we were making pieces for the bride, bridesmaids, and for the mothers of the brides and groom. The amount of money he was spending was more than I would ever hope to see in my lifetime. The order was taken and put away in a file we have for him as a regular client. Walt was going to be working with me as it was such a huge order, and Walt knew the client personally. The morning Walt came to begin work, the order was nowhere to be found. It wasn't in the file or anywhere else in the office. It was strange as we keep duplicate copies so Walt and I can work at different benches without having to share an order. At first, we weren't really concerned, but after an hour, I could see that Walt was starting to get stressed. I had to admit, that was probably not the time for me to say he would have to computerize our orders. Walt snapped at me for the first time in 20 years, that maybe if I was not slopping in my work, he would not be having to spend a fortune replacing tools and apologizing to clients for delays in missing orders. I was genuinely stunned, as Walt and I have always had such a good working relationship. We were standing in the main shop before opening when he said it, and the glee on Richard's face was obvious for all to see. Before I could reply, Richard chimed in to say that he was hoping to begin his training as a goldsmith, and he would be happy to work with Walt to train, so if I was getting too forgetful, I could do more duties on the shop floor where I couldn't lose tools. Walt snapped that maybe that was a good idea and went to phone the client to go over the order again, leaving me standing speechless in the middle of the shop. Richard smirked at me and said, "Oh, maybe it's time for some new blood to take over as Walt's prodigy." It was at that point I began to suspect Richard was behind all the missing items and loss of the order, but there was nothing I could do to prove it. The final nail in the coffin for me that day was when Richard miraculously found the missing order in the pocket of my overalls. Walt was mad as heck and told me to take the rest of the day off and refocus, as he's put a lot of trust in me when other people would have left me on the street corner. And that comment, ladies and gentlemen, is where I think Richard got the idea for his final plan. No one knew about my past, not the clients, not the staff who had come and gone over the years. At that point, not even the slimeball Richard. But the spark had been lit, and I'm sure that Richard dug and dug until he found out about the things I've done when I was much younger. Now, all I need to be able to do is prove that he set me up and tries to keep my butt out of prison. What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. So there's still 2 more updates, and things are about to get a little more crazy. The next update is only a few paragraphs long. It's really short, but it leads into the finale of one crazy final update. If you guys are enjoying this so far today, do me the biggest favor and click that subscribe button. It's the best way to support me, and I thank you so much for that. Here is update number 3. Thank you. Thank you 1,000 thank yous to the genius who messaged me after my last update. You devious man have given me the hope that this could soon be over. I'm reluctant to put in writing just what he suggested, as it may be a small chance Richard came across this before I put the plan into action, then it won't work. And I still may be on one trip to prison. However, if this works, I'll be here shouting from the mountaintops in triumph. Also, if God's willing, I get my job back, and I promise that I'll create you a piece of jewelry as a thank you. I'm not a religious man per se, but I've prayed so hard the last couple of weeks, and now I see a light at the end of the tunnel. This is a short update, as I wanted just to say thank you to my supporter, and to say I'll be putting your plan into place, brother. I'm meeting Walt this afternoon to talk. He wasn't willing to meet up until this point, but as my savior suggested, I played it as I wanted to clear the air between us. And I think Walt thinks I'm about to admit I did it. Not at all I need to do is to get Walt to listen and give me a chance to prove I'm innocent, and I would never let him down. Walt's the only decent father figure I've ever had in my life, and I would never do anything to hurt him. All being well, I'll have a final update for you in a day or so, and it'll be a positive one, I'm hoping. If this goes wrong and I can't clear my name, I'm still grateful to the support I've received, especially those from you who have made a new life from a bad start. Wish me luck, and no matter what, I'm grateful for the support. If on the off chance I don't update again, it's probably best to assume that it all went to heck, and I'm heading for life in a jail cell as a jailbird. Update Number 4, final update. I'm back. So good news first, I'm not in prison, and hopefully once the events of the last few days are looked at properly by the authorities, I never will be. It's been stressful and exhausting, but I may be able to go back to normal life soon. I'll start at the beginning of this next chapter with me meeting with Walt. We met at a quiet cafe away from our normal haunt, so we could talk without being disturbed by people we might know. News has spread around the neighborhood that I was being charged with theft. Thanks, Richard. And so I had been avoiding being seen in public anywhere near the shop. When I walked into the restaurant, Walt was already there, and it looked like he had aged in the last couple of weeks. There was a look on his face as if I walked in on that part of happiness and part of regret and disappointment. When I sat opposite of him, I felt this wash of hurt and sadness that I've let him down. He's invested so much in me for the last 20 years. I took a deep breath and began to talk. I had all the documents, events that I believed were Richard beginning to set me up. Walt listened, but he looked at me as though I was desperately clutching at straws to find a way out. He asked me why Richard would go to all the trouble of setting me up when we both worked at the same place in different jobs. I said that I thought that was the problem. Richard has said over and over that he wanted to work on the creation and design, and there's no way that could happen while I was there. I pointed out that Richard also talked a lot about how he could improve the business in the future and introduce himself as the manager. It's no secret that I hope that Walt would entrust the business to me when he decides to retire, and Richard needed me out of the way. Somehow Richard found out about my past, and he decided that the easiest way to get rid of me would just be to use that in a way where I couldn't come back from it. Walt seemed to be reluctant to accept it, as it seemed like an over-the-top way to get rid of a colleague. I agreed, it was. But I think Richard came from a background where you did whatever you could to get your way. I laid out my proposal to Walt and asked for just this one chance to prove I've not stolen from him. Walt took a deep breath and agreed, and the plan was put into motion. Now, it's finished. I can safely tell you what the genius in my comment suggested. I hired a private detective to stalk Richard and dig in every part of his life. I couldn't really afford it, but to clear my name, it was worth selling a few belongings to make it happen. The last thing Walt said as he left the restaurant was that if I was proved right, he would pay the private detective fees himself. It was a simple plan, really. Walt was the staff member down, and so it made sense that he hired someone to work in the shop while he trained Richard in the back. 2 days after our meeting, Walt introduced Dave to Richard as a friend of who he's going to cover the shop until and after the trial, and Walt had a chance to hire somebody permanent. Dave was my detective, and he went into work wearing a recorded device and ready to investigate everything he could about Richard. Once it was in place, I sat back and waited. It was surreal, really. I felt like I was in a spy novel. Dave updated me as he went and gave me suggestions to give to my lawyer, to dig into Richard's past and lifestyle, and oh boy, did we find some dirt. I could write a novel on the lying little rat that Richard is, but I'll knock it down to the essentials, which basically allowed me to clear my name. Firstly, Richard wasn't Richard. It's Jason, and Jason had a record as long as my arm. When Dave provided that information, I was stunned. How in the heck had Richard managed to fool Walt into giving him a job and pull it off looking like an educated rich boy? I immediately handed the information to my lawyer, and he passed it to the police, who were extremely interested to find out Richard was hiding. Now my past is not a secret in my neighborhood. I'm seen as this bad boy who pulled himself out of the gutter. It's also well known that when I was younger, I ran with a pretty bad crowd, and was a criminal until Walt gave me a chance. Richard was part of a group of people who gritted and scammed people all over the country. One of my old acquaintances became part of the group, and when they were looking for their next scam, the acquaintance have told them about me and my job as a high-end jeweler. It was too good for them to resist. Their plan was genius in its simplicity. They would put a member of the group in as a new member of staff. Walt's been advertising for a while he needed help, and then once they had set themselves up as a loyal member of the staff, they would set me up for the fall, allowing the gang to pull off one of the biggest heists of their career. Richard would stay with Walt long enough for me to be convicted before disappearing back into his old life. I would be in prison, and Richard and his cronies would be considerably wealthier than they had been begun. We found out all this one evening in my lawyer's office as the police set out their plan to take Richard and his fellow gang members out. To say I owe Dave everything would definitely be an understatement. He put in a lot of work, and I can't go into all the details as until after the arrest and trial for Richard, I'm not allowed to give details of the investigation. But needless to say, he earned every single penny of his fee. The police never would have believed me if I turned up and tried to convince them that Richard was the bad guy. So for me, it's over. My name's about to be cleared, and soon I'll be able to return to work doing what I love, my passion. Richard was arrested at work, so the whole neighborhood saw that in my triumphant return. Walt's been devastated that he doubted me, but I don't hold against him anything. Richard set him up well, and in time he'll hopefully get some of the lost merchandise back. But whatever happens, my name is finally cleared, and Richard will be getting everything he deserves. Or should I say Jason?
This story just proves you really can't trust anyone unless you've been around them for so long. There's always something that somebody's hiding. It turns out not only did this guy want the job of OP, oh no, it was much deeper than that. He was part of an organization who does this around the world, and they were looking for their biggest hit, jewelry. Guys, let me know your thoughts of this story. Drop them in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Mr. Reddito if you don't know who I am, and I read daily stories. If that sounds like something you're into, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.